listeners and viewers.
Yes. Mr. Kankwasa, we want to know more about the operation that NEMA did carry out yesterday across Lubigi for the ecological core functions of the Lubigi. How is this going ahead, and how long is it going to be taking, and of course the aims and of this operation?
Well, we are in Lubigi to ensure that Lubigi is restored back to its core ecological status. We are trying to remove encroachers from Lubigi so that it can continue providing the much needed ecological services of flood control, pollution control, buffering of our lakes, and as well as climate amelioration, and as well as also, the wetland is important for absorbing unwanted emissions, and this is an urban wetland, so it's extremely important for our healthy living as urban people. It is the only big wetland that is actually serving Wakiso and Kampala areas in terms of controlling flooding, in terms of underground water recharge system, but most importantly, buffering our lakes from pollution. So that's why we are there. We are there to clean it up. The operation started yesterday, and will continue for an specified period. We do not want to go into details of the operation, as that would jeopardize the operation. All we can say is that the operation is going on.
Yes, and also one would wonder, because we know that NEMA has a watchdog, and of course now we see people doing construction, settlement, and all these activities. We want to know, how do people end up there? Have there been operations before, at least to make sure that we don't have the problem in the first place of encroachment?
Yes, there has been several operations in the Lubigi area. The most recent one was in 2016 when people were evicted there. But as you know, human nature, they keep coming back. And so we don't get tired. We continue preaching the message of the need to conserve that ecosystem for the good of us all. But we also continue to ensure that encroachment doesn't happen. The sustainable way of having it would be permanent presence, and the government is moving to recruit staff to be permanently stationed there in terms of active management, the way national parks are managed, the way central forest reserves are managed. It's the sustainable way of saving the wetlands. We should have wetlands conserved in terms of active management on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to leaving them without active management. As we see, that approach hasn't worked, so we need to move towards active management of the remaining wetlands to avoid losing them.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you also look into the fact that now this has led to more of the eviction that is coming now. But some locals are also saying that they were not aware. They did not get prior notice about the eviction, and of course now they would be calling for more time. Is this something that you have done as NEMA to make sure that these people are, noticed prior, so that they can prepare themselves to being evicted?
There are two issues. One is that it is true we issued the restoration orders and vacation notes to people a long time ago, and the 21 days have lapsed, as you know. But it is also not true that to enforce the law you must always give notice. If you catch a thief in stealing money in a bank, the thief cannot give a plea that, you see, I need to first be given a notice to stop stealing. So encroachment is an offense, and wherever we find you encroaching, we enforce the law. But to answer your question, yes, we did issue restoration orders, and we did give people time to vacate, and we still call upon people who are encroaching on wetlands to vacate voluntarily, so that we can have harmony with nature, so that we can allow these wetlands to regenerate, to serve all of us. Because when floods come, when global warming happens, all of us suffer equally, whether you encroached or you did not encroach. So it is in the interest of the very people encroaching to vacate voluntarily so that all of us can enjoy the ecological services of these wetlands.
Well, Doctor, also help us understand the wetlands for the rich and the poor should not be there. Why? Because we hear people have certificates to work in these wetlands. We see some parts in this country, we have industrial parks, but these are well-known wetlands. So when you evict these yam, banana, people planting banana, doing some bit of planting trees here and there, doesn't it create an impact or an image or impression that it is the poor to leave the wetlands and the rich can use them?
First of all, we do not want to condemn the poor to die. Because being poor should not be a crime to die. When you grow yams, bananas, sugar canes in an urban wetland, which is heavily laden with heavy metals like mercury, like lead, because of the wetland managing pollutants from a neighborhood, then you are condemning the poor to die. So it wouldn't be prudent to condemn the poor to eat heavy metal laden foods, cabbages, sugarcane, matoke, which are laden with heavy metals. We would be condemning them to death because that food, first of all, is not fit for human consumption due to pollutants within urban wetlands. If it was an upcountry wetland that is not urban, that food may be consumable, but the food in Lubigi and other urban wetlands wouldn't be fit for human consumption. So first of all, we must save people from poisoning themselves. But two, when we are doing enforcement, we don't look at how much money you have on your bank account. We don't know your economic status. For us, we look at encroachment, we look at somebody who has offended the law. So we do not first classify that, you see, for you, you have 1 billion on account, so we shall leave you. For you are a poor man, we shall take you. No, our operations do not classify people according to their economic status. And as you will be observing, our operations are actually going to be sweeping. We shall be sweeping. So there is no segregation, whether you are rich or poor. For as long as you have offended the law will be enforced against you.
So quite another one also, just to find out from NEMA as an institution, why don't we focus and invest more on proactive measures to avoid people to actually encroach on these wetlands than spending money on enforcement, because it does come with its own rigorous challenges?
Yes, it's true. I said earlier that the sustainable way is to continue educating the public, is to continue engaging the local people, is to promote alternative sources of livelihoods in suitable wetlands. For example, fishing and aquaculture can do well in wetlands, not urban wetlands, though, because of the pollution I talked about. So government will continue to promote alternative sources of livelihoods to people dependent on wetlands, so that they can coexist with wetlands. You can still make money, say, from aquaculture. If you line fish ponds along the edges of the wetlands near you, you can still make more money actually than the money people are making in growing rice, yams, etc. So it is true, the most sustainable way is not enforcement. Enforcement only comes to clean up, and then you need active management. You need a manager stationed on at the ecosystem with a management plan, engaging the people, developing the wetland for economic activities that are compatible. For example, tourism. There is a wetland called Bigodi in Kamwenje. That wetland makes a lot of money for the communities. The communities have made so many things: schools, hospitals, scholarships for their children from using that wetland for tourism, just birding, what we call tourism. So you can do a lot more livelihood activities on wetlands without damaging them.
So maybe just Mr. Edie, just a quick one. Is there possibilities that individuals own wetlands in the law? Is it covered, or does it definitely they all do belong to government as an institution? Do we have scenarios where we have individuals owning some of these wetlands?
The scenarios where individuals own wetlands are those who have titles issued before 1995, because wetlands were first conserved by the 1995 Constitution, and so every wetland where it is existing after 1995 would be public land and is protected. So titles issued after 1995 are null and void, and those wetlands belong to government. But titles issued before 1995, the titles remain valid and the owners are true owners. However, they cannot use this land the way they want. They have to follow land use guidelines. They have to conserve environment as they continue to use their land.
Okay, and of course, there is also information that one has to acquire rights to be able to use the wetlands, even in this age, as you're talking about, prior to what was issued way back when you say those will be null and void. But up to now, we do know that there is a criteria to acquire rights to use the wetland. How is that done, and what is the basis of that criteria?
The law allows you to apply for what we call wetland user permit for compatible activities. For example, wetlands can be used for filtering waste or sewage treatment, like you see National Water and Sewage Corporation plant at Lubigi, which is there. You can also acquire a permit, for example, to pass electricity transmission lines on wetlands. You've seen roads being suspended. For example, the express highway to Entebbe is suspended above a wetland. So you can actually acquire a permit to use wetlands for compatible activities. For example, fish farming, for recreation activities. But the law does not allow use of wetlands to be converted from wetlands into permanent land, into unflooded land, for example, through backfilling. That is illegal and should be condemned.
Doctor, also recently we heard that NEMA now you no longer give people authority to use wetlands. How true is this, and enlighten more? What process, how did you arrive to this? Because previously, like you've talked, people would get permits. But I'm told around either early this year or late last year, you came up with a decision that now wetlands should be left as wetlands.
Yes, it is true. On 2nd September 2021, we decided to suspend issuance of permits and certificates in wetlands as a radical measure to protect the remaining wetlands and save ourselves from losing wetlands. If you look at the statistics, we've lost our wetland cover from 15% in less than 10 years to now only 8.9% intact wetlands. And so at the rate we are losing wetlands, if we do not take radical measures, by 2040 we shall be remaining with about less than 2% of our wetland cover. So yes, it is true, we took a radical measure as part of government wider efforts to save the remaining wetlands, and since 2nd September 2021, we suspended further issuance of permits and certificates for use of wetlands to give them a lease of life. Otherwise, we were losing them at a faster rate. But also the issue was, if you give a permit, for example, for somebody to do fish farming, people would abuse that right. Instead of doing fish farming, they would construct houses. So until we have adequate capacity to effectively monitor the conditions of the permit, we decided to say, let us suspend. We first build our internal capacity to monitor, then we can reconsider later.
Then also a quick one, Doctor. What does the law say in case I've been found working in a wetland? I'm growing my yams there. In case I'm arrested and I don't just take off or away from just destroying my property?
Where you can be prosecuted for an offense of development in a wetlands without a permit, which is an offense under the law, and the courts can decide to fine you or imprison you, depending on what the courts will have decided.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kankwasa, for having this conversation with us. And of course, we do appreciate NEMA's efforts towards making sure that we have a very core function of wetlands that is restored to its ecological way. And of course, that is where we'll also be taking it from, because you look at the fact that most of the Ugandans are being affected by this. Thank you very much again, Dr. Kankwasa, for this morning.
Thank you.
Yes, Robert, I know that you have been mostly involved in farming, at least among the three of us. And you look at the fact that most of what is happening is people who are cultivating into these wetlands are actually introducing unfamiliar species that they're talking about. They have replaced papyrus with